I still remember the first time I saw Anna. It wasn't a dramatic moment from a film. No crashing violins or candlelit gazes. Just a quiet evening at a mutual friend's gathering. She was laughing at something across the room, her head tilted slightly, her eyes alive with light. That laugh was enough to draw me in. I introduced myself, nervous but eager, and from that night on, I felt as though fate had nudged me into something I couldn't ignore. Our early days were simple yet unforgettable. We were two young dreamers trying to figure out life, working modest jobs and scraping together spare change for coffee dates. Nothing was extravagant, but everything felt meaningful. I remember the nights we would sit on a park bench, sharing a sandwich because that was all we could afford, yet somehow believing we had the world in our hands. Love was enough, at least that was what I thought. In time, love grew into commitment. I asked Anna to marry me one rainy afternoon after we had just moved into our first small apartment. There was no grand proposal. Just my trembling voice, a modest ring, and her eyes filling with tears. She said yes, and in that moment I believed life had finally given me a permanent reason to be happy. Our wedding was modest but beautiful. Family gathered, friends cheered, and we danced like the world had disappeared. That night, lying in bed with Anna's head resting on my chest, I made silent promises to never let her down, to always protect her, and to make sure she never doubted my love. I thought we were both making those vows to each other, unbreakable, unshakable. The first years of marriage felt like a continuation of our love story. We bought a little house in the suburbs, one that needed more fixing than we could afford but felt perfect anyway. I remember painting the walls with her, both of us splattered with color, laughing when we realized the shade we picked looked completely different once it dried. We argued about furniture, laughed about bills, and talked late into the night about the children we might one day have. Life wasn't always easy, but it was ours, and I thought that was enough to keep us strong. What I cherished most were the small routines. Every morning Anna would brew the coffee, humming softly to herself in the kitchen, while I packed my work bag. On weekends we made a ritual of grocery shopping together, turning an ordinary errand into an adventure of inside jokes and shared snacks. Evenings were spent curled on the couch, watching films or talking about nothing and everything. Those everyday moments became the fabric of our life, and I convinced myself that such ordinary beauty was proof our bond was indestructible. Yet even in those years, there were shadows I refused to notice. Anna would sometimes grow quiet during dinner, her eyes lost in thought while I rambled on about my day. She would claim to be tired or distracted, and I accepted that explanation without question. On a few occasions she stayed late at work, and although something in me wondered, I quickly silenced the doubt. Trust, I told myself, was the foundation of marriage. And I trusted her completely. Looking back, perhaps I was too eager to believe in perfection. I wore my devotion like armor, protecting me from questions I wasn't ready to face. I wanted so badly to think our love was unshakable that I ignored the tiny cracks forming beneath the surface. Still, in those years I was happy, blissfully blind perhaps, but happy. To me, Anna was not just my wife. She was my partner, my confidant, my home. Everything in my world was anchored to her presence. I didn't realize that while I was holding on with all my strength, she was already beginning to let go. The thought never crossed my mind that one day, the life we built together would no longer be enough for her. But the truth was waiting, and it would arrive sooner than I ever imagined. The changes began subtly, almost imperceptible at first. Anna had always been attentive, always present, but gradually her warmth began to cool. At dinner she would stare at her plate longer than usual, or check her phone while I was speaking. She started spending more evenings at the office, apologizing with tired eyes and promises that her workload was overwhelming. I wanted to believe her, and so I did. Trust, after all, was something I never questioned between us. But trust can be a kind of blindness. One night, she returned home well past midnight. Her explanation was polished, almost rehearsed. Something about an urgent deadline, a client who wouldn't leave until the documents were perfect. I nodded, though her voice sounded distant, as though she were reciting lines from a play. That night, lying beside her in bed, I realized she had turned her back to me. It was a small gesture, perhaps meaningless to anyone else, but to me it felt like a door slowly closing. I tried to dismiss my unease. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe stress was simply taking its toll on her. For weeks I buried my suspicions, convincing myself that doubt would only poison what we had built. Yet the signs grew harder to ignore. She began dressing with more care for ordinary workdays. New dresses, subtle perfume, lipstick she once reserved only for special occasions. Her laughter, once shared with me, was now saved for text messages she typed quickly and hid the moment I entered the room. One evening, while preparing dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. She was upstairs, and instinct pulled my eyes to the screen. A message preview lit up, a name I did not recognize, followed by words that pierced like a blade. "I miss you already." My hands froze, the knife hovering above the cutting board, as my heart thundered in my chest. For a long moment I stood there, unable to breathe, until Anna's footsteps descended the stairs. I placed the phone back carefully, as though it were a fragile secret, and said nothing. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. I wanted to confront her then, but fear restrained me. Fear of hearing the truth spoken aloud. Fear that my world might collapse with a single sentence. So I waited. I watched her more closely, searching for confirmation of what I already knew but refused to accept. Came on a Saturday afternoon. I had left work early, deciding to surprise her with her favorite flowers, lilies, believing perhaps we only needed a reminder of who we once were. Driving past a small cafe, I noticed a familiar figure at the window. Anna sat across from a man, her hand resting gently over his. They leaned toward each other, laughing softly in a way that used to belong only to us. Time seemed to slow. I wanted to storm inside to demand answers, but my body betrayed me. I sat frozen in the car, flowers trembling in my hands, watching as she looked at him with the tenderness I thought was mine alone. The lilies slipped from my grasp and fell to the floor. That night I confronted her. My voice was unsteady, but my words left no room for denial. I told her what I had seen. For a brief moment, her face was pale with shock, but it quickly hardened into resignation. She didn't deny it. She didn't invent excuses. Instead, she whispered words I never imagined hearing. "I love him." The room spun around me. I wanted to shout, to plead, to make her see what she was destroying, but her calmness left me powerless. She packed a small bag that evening, folding clothes with the same care she once used to fold our shared laundry. I sat in silence, listening to the sound of zippers and drawers, the final notes of a life unraveling. When the door closed behind her, the house echoed with emptiness. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the distant sounds of traffic, all became reminders of a silence I could not bear. I was alone, abandoned by the person I trusted most, left to sort through the ruins of promises I thought unbreakable. And yet, as I sat there, numb and hollow, I knew this was not the end. The true challenge was only beginning, the battle not to win her back, but to... The first days after Anna left were a blur of silence and shadows. I wandered through the house like a stranger, haunted by the echoes of her presence. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter. A scarf of hers lay draped across the couch. Even the faint trace of her perfume lingered in the bedroom, tormenting me each night I tried and failed to sleep. Everything looked the same, yet nothing was. The life we had built together had collapsed, and I was left with the rubble. First I couldn't eat. Food turned to ash in my mouth. Sleep became a battlefield where memories ambushed me without warning. I would see her smile, hear her laugh, feel her head resting on my chest, only to wake to the crushing emptiness of an abandoned bed. Friends called, family visited, but I kept them at a distance. Their comfort felt hollow. Their words, "You'll get through this," rang false against the storm inside me. Grief gave way to anger. I replayed every moment of our marriage, dissecting each word, each silence, searching for signs I had missed. I cursed myself for being blind, for ignoring the late nights and distracted glances. And then I cursed Anna, for betraying the vows we once held sacred, for giving to another man what was supposed to be ours alone. Some nights I shouted into the emptiness, as though my rage could fill the void she left behind. But rage, like grief, eventually drained me. It left me hollow, staring at the walls of a house that no longer felt like home. Desperation pushed me to search for distractions. I threw myself into work, staying longer hours to avoid the stillness of the evenings. I joined a gym, forcing my body to move when my mind wanted only to collapse. I began writing in a journal, pouring out thoughts too heavy to carry. Each page became a confession, a mirror reflecting my pain but also my resilience. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sharp edges of heartbreak began to soften. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the park where Anna and I once shared those meager sandwiches in the early days of our love. The bench was the same, the trees older, their branches heavy with leaves. But I was different. For the first time, I didn't picture her beside me. I simply watched the world around me. Children playing, couples walking, strangers laughing, and realized life had not stopped, even if mine once had. It was then I understood something vital. Anna's choice did not erase my worth. Her leaving was not proof of my inadequacy but of her own restless searching. The love we shared was real, but it had ended. And endings, as painful as they are, also carry within them the seed of new beginnings. With that realization, I started building a life not defined by her absence. I learned to cook simple meals for myself, finding pride in flavors I once thought I couldn't manage. I reconnected with old friends, accepting invitations I had ignored while married. I discovered hobbies I had never made time for. Photography, long walks at sunrise, books I had left unopened on the shelf. Piece by piece, I stitched myself back together, not perfectly, but enough to stand again. The scar of betrayal never truly fades, but scars are proof of survival. I no longer wake in the night expecting to find Anna beside me. I no longer check my phone, hoping for a message that will never come. Instead, I wake to the quiet strength of solitude, the knowledge that I endured what once seemed unbearable. Sometimes I still wonder about her. Whether she is happy, whether the man she chose gave her what she thought I couldn't. But those thoughts no longer consume me. They drift through my mind like passing clouds, here for a moment and gone the next. What matters is not where she is, but where I am, and I am still here. Anna may have run away with another man, but I chose to stay. Stay alive. Stay strong. Stay true to myself. And though the life we shared ended in betrayal, the life I am building now begins in resilience. That is my victory, quiet but unshakable.